Hi, I'm Jessica Smith. I work with Lincoln City Libraries. I've been there for over 17 years, and I am housed at the Walt Branch Library. Today we are going to talk about succulent container gardening. It's one of my personal hobbies. I have been doing it for over 5 years at my home. I brought some of my favorite specimens. I have plants all over my house, and in my windowless basement I have a little nursery that my husband set up for me with plant lights, and I do a lot of growing there as well. Over the years I've come up with a few tips and tricks that work really well for me and really well for the environment that we live in Lincoln, Nebraska. So I'm going to talk a little bit about repotting and soil. We're going to talk a little bit about propagating, which is one of my favorite subjects. That's a way that you can increase your collection. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about some of the awesome, wonderful new books that Lincoln City Library owns in their collection on propagating plants and caring for succulents. And those are always available at Lincoln City Libraries. Okay, so one of the first important things is soil for your succulents. You want a very well draining soil. Succulents are mostly in the desert, and those are very dry climates. When it rains, the succulents just kind of know that it's just not going to rain very often, so they absorb as much water as they possibly can in their leaves. And so you'll do that by just drenching your plant, and then you won't water them again until it's very, very dry. That's how you can kind of mimic that climate. Nebraska is a Zone 5, which means we have very extreme and cold weather. So I choose to put my succulents in containers so that I can enjoy them outside in the spring, summer, and fall, and then I bring them in the winter so that they won't freeze. Most of these succulents that I collect are tender succulents, so they will not survive outside. Some of the tender succulents are graptos. This one is a moonstone. And graptos have these really thick, chubby stems. Also, echeveras are soft succulents. And chalk sticks right here. These are pork and beans. These are all some of my favorites. They have beautiful colors. I love the pastels and the purples. The hardy plants, the hardy succulents, can be left outside, and you can also put those in the ground and just leave them. Some of those would be hens and chicks. Those will survive outside. I usually put mine in the garage in the winter, but you can keep them outside. They'll be just fine. And also sedum and stone crops, which are some of my favorite. This is a stone crop that will last all year. And this one is a sedum that you can put outside. It will die back in the winter, but it's just dormant. It will come back in the spring and last through the fall. And I just think these colors are very beautiful with the cream and the green. And I just purchased this one, and I'm waiting. I'm going to wait till the spring to pot it, just because I want it to establish itself a little bit. So we are going to talk a little bit first about the type of soil that you need for your succulents. I talked about needing something that will drain really well. You do not want to leave your succulents in soggy soil. That will cause root rot and soil gnats and a host of other problems. So when you bring your succulents home from the store, this is one example of the type of soil that the grower will put in it. And as you can see, I just bought this one, it's been in the greenhouse of the store for quite a while. There's some green fungus on top. It's just not good soil at all for a succulent. So I'm excited to repot this one, and I'll do that with you today. The couple types of soil that I like to use. My favorite one is Crump's greenhouse soil. This has volcanic rock in it and also some other organic things like pieces of wood chunks, a little bit of perlite. And this is the best soil that I have used that does not cause gnats, and I've never had root rot with any of the succulents that I have used with this soil. And I compost a lot, so I do have compost dirt at home, and I might add a little scoop of that into this and mix it all up and then use that in my succulent potting. The compost will give it some really great nutrients. Another type of soil, and this one is a little more obtainable. You can get this one at any garden center or even the hardware stores. This one doesn't have quite as much organic material in it. It does not have the volcanic rock, but it has perlite, some little chunks of wood, some sand. And that is what you want for your succulent soil. I usually, if you want to make your own, you can do 2 parts of an organic mix and then 1 part soil. So either organic rock, chicken grit, gravel as long as you rinse it out. You can use sand. So 2 parts of something that is rough and organic and then 1 part soil. Mix it together really well and you'll have your perfect type of succulent soil. And sometimes you just have to try and see what works for you, what works for in your house. If you have high humidity, you're going to definitely want something that drains even more, like the Crump's soil. So we're going to do a little repotting here real quick. I have my soil already mixed. This is the Crump's soil with a little bit of organic compost in it to give it some nutrients. And I'm just going to mix it up real quick here. And I'm going to start with this plant. This is called a woolly cocoon, a cocoon plant. It's a woolly senecio. And it's kind of in bad shape. I really wanted to rescue it from the greenhouse it was at. And pots. I'm going to talk about pots real quick. The most important advice I can give you for the type of pot is for it to have a drainage hole. That's really important. Otherwise, when you water your plants, the roots are going to be sitting in water for way too long, and that's going to cause root rot and a host of other problems. If you absolutely have fallen in love with a pot that does not have a drainage hole, you can try to drill one in the bottom using a diamond drill bit. And I have done that successfully and I've not broken any pots. Or if you must, you can put a layer of gravel in the bottom, and that usually can hopefully keep the roots out of the water. The water will be below the gravel. Some of the problem I've had with using gravel is that it eventually cements together and water can't get through anyway. So my main suggestion is get pots with the hole. And as you can see, I love terracotta pots. They're cheap, they almost always have the drainage hole, and they get a really nice patina on them as they age. Not sure if I have any examples, but so those are my favorite pots. I like how it looks uniform. But other people like to get all different types of pots that might set off the color of their flowers and whatnot. So we are going to pot this cocoon plant here. And sometimes, if you would like, you can buy some window screen. You can buy it in a roll and cut off a little chunk and put it in the bottom so that you don't lose so much soil over time from watering. I did not do that today. What I'm going to do is put a little bit of soil in the bottom of my pot. Okay. And then gently, I am going to loosen it from the pot that it came in. If you lose some leaves along the way, that's quite all right. I will show you what you can do with those afterwards. Some of these plants have what is called prune nose, which is a, it looks frosted and it's a powdery granule. And if you touch it with your fingers, the oils from your hands will damage the frost and it'll leave like a little fingerprint and it just won't look as pretty. So if you're repotting something like the moonstone or an echeveria that has the frost on it, you'll want to use just gardening gloves. That'll prevent from ruining any of that. Okay, so we have our plant here. We are going to take as much of this old dirt off as possible, and we want to get this green, I don't know if it's fungus or maybe a little moss, we want to get that off as well. So you don't want to disturb the roots too much, but you're just gently getting that old soil out. This is going to aerate the roots, which will promote better growth. And I'm also going to pick off any dead leaves, and I'll put those in my compost. If you can't get to the leaves without bothering the mother plant, you can try tweezers. Those seem to work really well. So just clean it up, get as much soil off as you possibly can from the roots without hurting the roots. I can feel the plant thanking me already. This will really help it thrive. You can see where this stem had been cut off at one time. So you can take scissors or a sharp knife and get that completely off. That little piece right there is dead, and it'll just make it look a little nicer. Okay, so we are going to try to figure out the height that we want our plant. And I am going to start putting a little more soil in here. This is just a little tool that helps you get your soil in there without disturbing your succulent plants. You don't need to have one of these. This was just a gift, and I really like using it. So I'm just scooping up the new soil, not the old soil that we just discarded. And I'm tucking it in there while holding up the succulent. And you kind of push it around. I'm going to go to the other side. You don't want to pack it down too much, but you do want to pack it, press it down a little bit so you don't end up with big gaps in your soil and not enough to protect the plant roots. Okay, I'm going to add a little bit more. Okay, pot size can also be important for your succulents. You do not want to have a huge pot with just a tiny little plant in it. A couple of things will happen. It may go into shock, or the roots will start growing super fast and the plant on top will not be able to catch up with it. So if you have a pot that you really want your plant to be put in, but it's way too big, just wait a little, wait a couple years. Keep it aside. For plants, you usually want about an inch from the plant to the lip of your pot. That will give it room to grow without making it go into shock. Okay, so here is our cocoon plant. And your first impulse would probably be to water it right away. That's usually what we do with other plants, flowering plants. With these, you don't want to water your succulent. You want to wait. You want to give it a week's time so that it can adjust to its new environment and its new soil and the fact that the roots had been disturbed. So you'll give it a week. And then my other tip is you put it in the sink and you completely drench it. And you let the water run out the bottom. If you have too many to put them in the sink, having a tray or a saucer underneath, that helps too. Just make sure you empty the saucer. You don't want your plant sitting with a saucer of water underneath. The roots are going to take that back up, and then you're going to get the root rot again. Okay, so I'm just going to look at my notes real quick. All right, so some of our plants kind of fell off as we were planting it. And there are a few things that you can do with these. I'm going to set them aside. I'm going to talk about watering real quick. Or not watering, I'm sorry. I'm going to talk about lighting real quick. If you want to take your plants outside during the summer, I suggest doing it in the spring when it's not quite so hot yet, and start them off in the shade. They need to be hardened off a little bit. If you put them in direct sunlight right away, they will burn. Their leaves will get brown. They might even just get completely mushy and die. The sunburn on the leaves doesn't really affect the plant too much, but it just isn't as pretty. So start them off in the shade. Then after a few days, put them in some dappled sunlight, then maybe move it to indirect sunlight, and then eventually you can put it in sunlight. But check on it during those stages to see how it's faring in its new conditions. You can also, if you want to garden inside, obviously a south-facing window is perfect. I just have one south-facing window in my house and it's crammed with plants, but they do really well in that spot. You can also supplement with a plant light if you feel it's not getting enough light. And buying a little timer for your plant light is a really nice addition, so you don't have to worry about turning it on and off, and it can get consistent extra light. Okay, so if you are interested in getting plant lights, they have them at many hardware stores and garden centers. There are plant lights for plants that flower, and then there's plant lights for plants that are just evergreen. And you can look online to figure out what you want and what you need, and you can probably also ask the staff at the garden centers. Okay, so we are going to talk about propagating. This is my favorite thing to talk about, my favorite thing to do. I get a little overexcited about propagating, and then I get overwhelmed because I end up with too many plants. There are 3 ways that you can propagate plants. One is by taking cuttings from the mother plant. They might have some really great offshoots. The other thing you can do are when leaves fall off, you can use those leaves to propagate them. And also from the stump, you can propagate, new sprouts might come off of that, and eventually they'll grow and you can cut them off the mother plant and then plant those. So first, let's talk about taking cuttings. Now, since we live in Nebraska, we don't have always the strongest sun. The plants might stretch. It's called etiolating. And I have a really good example of that. This sad little guy was stuck in the back of my little nursery. I wasn't paying attention to him. At one time I had cut off a beautiful stem right here and had repotted it, and then I kind of left it aside and he grew a complete new stem. And so he just looks really weird and strange, and he's having trouble standing up because he's top heavy. And you'll also notice a new little baby offshoot right here. This one isn't quite very big yet, so I'm not going to cut that one off, but I am going to take care of this. This is actually going to give us 2 plants. So what you need to make cuttings, first you want to make sure that what you're going to cut is healthy. If you've noticed root rot is setting in, you might be able to save the plant by taking a cutting, but you want to make sure you cut it above the black root rot. You'll need clean clippers or scissors or a knife, and you'll want to sterilize them with alcohol, make sure they're sharp, and then kind of figure out where you want to make your cut. I am going to make my cut right here, right above this leaf. Leaving a few leaves on will allow for photosynthesis to occur. That's where the sun gives the plant energy and it can store it in its leaves so it can grow. And it does that from the leaves. So I am going to cut this. I am going to cut this stem at an angle. That's because the water inside the stem will be able to run off. If I cut it flat, the water tends to just pool on the open wound, and it's going to make your stem mushy and it won't be healthy. So I'm going to take my clippers. You can use scissors or a knife, whatever you're comfortable with. And I'm going to make my cut right here at an angle. And you can see that the end of the stem, you can see that it's wet. And I am going to remove a few leaves so that I have a nice little rosette with about 2 inches that I can repot later. So I'm actually going to take these off by twisting them. I'm going to save them for later. Just take them off very gently. And this is one of those plants that has that frost on it, so I should probably be wearing gloves to kind of save it. Okay. All right. I'm going to take this one off. All right. I think I'm going to leave it like that. I am going to cut it down about 2 inches so we have a nice stem. Okay. So the end of the stem is wet, and if you put it in potting soil, it may rot because your potting soil may be damp. So the best thing to do is let it callus over for a few days. The thicker the stem, the longer you'll need to let it callus over. And you'll know that it's ready to be potted because it's no longer bright green and wet. It'll have a little scab over it. And to let it callus over for a few days, I just set it aside in a saucer or on the table or on a little tray, and you'll want to keep it out of direct sunlight. Just set it in the corner, let it callus over. Once it's ready to be potted, you can get your potting soil ready, and you can use some rooting hormone if you would like. This is completely optional. I personally haven't found a difference in using rooting hormone to just planting it. This is kind of messy as well, but it's supposed to make your cuttings root quicker. So then you'll just pot it in. It doesn't have any roots, so you want to give it sunlight, but not direct sunlight. It doesn't have a rooting system that will let it self-regulate and cool, so it will burn quickly in the sun, but you do want to give it some light. And while it doesn't have any roots, you will want to water it once a week. And then once a strong root system is established, you'll know that it's growing, and then you can start watering it with the soak and dry method that I had talked about, and it will start thriving. Okay. The second way of propagating is actually my favorite, and that is from leaves. Quite often you will bump leaves. That happened in my car on the way over here, and I just save them. You'll want to choose leaves from the mother plant that are unblemished. This is a round leaf echeveria, and it's in sad, sad shape. This is another one of mine that was in the back of my nursery. I didn't pay any attention to it, and I had cut the top off at one time, and then it just grew very wonky. But at the bottom, it has these beautiful, beautiful round leaves. And you'll want to choose leaves that are towards the bottom because they're more mature, but also leaves that are not damaged, have any blemishes. You'll want to make sure that they're healthy. The bigger the leaf, the bigger pup that the leaf will produce. If you use little tiny ones like this, I'll show you an example in a little bit. It's just going to be a very small plant coming out of it, and it takes a really long time to grow. I just don't have the patience for that. So I like to use as large as possible leaves. So we talked about choosing the leaves, and then how you take them off is just twisting with your hands. And you just try not to disturb any of the other leaves. So I'm going to take this one right here. It looks the healthiest. And I'm going to just twist it off from the mother plant. And I don't want to break any of the leaf that I am taking off. Otherwise, it won't, if I break it, it won't propagate. So I'm just going to twist. Comes off very easily. And there it is. And sometimes you can see a little leaf node where it came off. You might notice these are a little withered. They have some brown spots on them. I wouldn't use those. I would leave those on there. Okay, so I am also going to take this leaf. I'm going to twist it. And just twist it off. This one's a little more stubborn. There it is. And I am also going to cut these two funky looking ones off, and I'm going to make them into two different plants, but make them look a little better, and hopefully they'll grow a little better. So I'm going to cut it off right here. And then I'm going to cut this one as well right here. Now, since we've removed significant amounts from this plant, we might be lucky and get some more offshoots from it, and that's always really fun. That is how this Pearl von Nuremberg occurred. It was a tall plant, and it became etiolated, stretched out, so I cut the top off, replanted it, and then I got a little surprise. I got this little offshoot from the side. I was quite proud of myself. I just think it's so cute, and it's unique, and it's coming out the side. Once it gets a little stronger, I will cut it off, let it callus over, and then plant it. So I'm going to set these little guys aside. I'll work on those at home. Okay, so you have your leaves, and a few of these also fell off in the car ride over. I would let these callus over for a couple of days, maybe 3 days, set them aside. Again, don't put them in direct sunlight. You'll know they're calloused over when they're no longer bright green inside and they don't look wet. So the next thing we're going to do is make a propagation tray. You can use anything you want for your propagation tray for your leaves. Even a plastic fast food tray will work. You just want to put a little soil in the bottom. And when you're propagating leaves, you don't necessarily need to use the soil that has a lot of organic medium and chunks in it. You can use a gardening soil because during the propagation you do want the soil to stay damp, not sopping wet, but damp. And if you use something like crumps, the water will drain out of it very quickly and you won't get that nice damp soil that you need. So you're going to prepare a propagation tray. You can use anything that you want. I just get these at Campbell's and Earl May. You're going to line your tray with a couple inches of gardening soil. And I make sure that there aren't any rocks or anything in it so that it's not disturbing any of the new leaves. Once you have your propagation tray ready to go, you can start putting your leaves in it. This is my propagation tray from home. It has a large variety of items in it, and this is way too crowded, but I wanted to just show you all the different things that I had growing right now. If you crowd your propagation plant, you're plants, your leaves will stall and they just won't grow. So I try to keep them neat and orderly, make sure that they have enough space to grow. They are calloused over, so you're going to water them. And how you will water them is, the best way is with a spray bottle. And you're just going to spray water onto them. Give them a nice mist. I mist them every day with water, but I notice the days that I miss getting them sprayed, they seem to stall. And it's so fun to wake up every morning or come home in the evening and see how each leaf has changed. It may take a few weeks for you to see any growth on it. One of the things you want to refrain from doing, and it's very hard to refrain from doing this, is picking up each leaf to inspect it and see if it's getting any roots. I am going to do that for this just so I can show you what we have. This one is a round leaf echeveria, so that's what this will end up looking like. His little baby pup that came out. He does look a little wonky, but he's just growing. Here are its roots. Eventually this, as you can see, is getting all wrinkled. Eventually it's going to die off and wither up. The mother leaf is what the baby plant is getting its nutrients and water from, which is why we want the healthier leaves. We want to propagate the healthiest leaves. That's the only energy that the baby plant is getting, is from the mother plant and the mother plant's roots. Some propagation problems. Sometimes you might just get roots from one of your leaves. Leave it for a while. I think this is one example. You can kind of see there's just roots on it. There's no baby coming from it. If roots just keep growing, one thing you can do is try to shock it into producing a baby. And you can do that by pulling out or tearing off just a few of the roots. Not all of them, just a few of them. Maybe even some of the baby ones. So just pull them out. You don't have to worry about it callousing over. And then put it back in its propagation tray and give it a good squirt. This is moonstone that's growing a nice little baby on it, and you can see its pink roots. It's one of my favorite ones. This is a kalanchoe from this plant, and the leaves produce baby pups a little bit differently, and this is the first time I've propagated these. These beautiful little flowers just started appearing on it. I didn't know it propagated that way, so I think that's really neat. I don't exactly know how it's going to turn out, so it's kind of fun, but you can see the mother leaf is already dying and wrinkling. Eventually the mother leaf will fall off, and once your plant is about an inch big, your new pup, once it's about an inch big and it has an established root system, then you can put it in its own little pot and start watering it regularly with the soak and wait and dry it system. And eventually you'll have your own little plants. I grew this from a leaf, and I just think it's so sweet. This is my favorite one. I grew this from a leaf. This is a Pearl von Nuremberg. He got a little dirt on him in the car. Right over. I just think he's so beautiful. Look at those beautiful purple colors. And here's another one that I still have it in its nursery cup. This is from my succulent nursery in the basement. Okay. Another thing about propagating leaves this way is less than 50% of yours will survive. Less than 50% will actually produce a pup. Quite often in my propagation tray, I will have a pile of dead leaves over here. You will know that it's not going to propagate when your leaf turns translucent before it has even produced any leaves. This is I believe this is a pork and bean plant. And I don't know if you can see, but it's starting to turn a little bit clear, translucent, and it's very soft. And it's calloused over, but there are no roots in it. This one, I wouldn't even waste my time. I would just put it in a compost pile. It's not going to produce anything for you. But anything that you are able to take off without breaking the leaf has a good chance of surviving and producing a baby plant for you. Okay, so I'm going to put the propagation tray away. The third way of propagating and getting new plants is from the stump. And I showed you one example with this Pearl von Nuremberg echeveria. This beautiful little flower grew out of the stump. I didn't have to do anything for it, although I'm very proud of it. My other favorite one, move the burrow's tails, is this echeveria. I don't know what it's called, but I had removed some leaves, some dead leaves from around the top, and it must have done something to it, gave it great energy. Maybe the energy was able to concentrate more on growing pups. But look at all these sweet little babies that are growing on here. And I had to do nothing but water it. There's a couple over here. There's a couple down here. And then this is just incredible. There are little baby pups growing up and down the stem. So I keep this one outside and I give it a lot of morning sunshine because I don't want to burn the little babies. And miraculously, the squirrels have stayed out of it. But this one I'm really excited to see. Now some of these, the babies might start growing on top of each other and they're going to deform. So you might want to pick and choose which ones to let continue to grow. Eventually they'll be strong enough, they'll grow out this way that you can cut them off, let it callus over, and then plant it in a new pot, and you will increase your collection. So that is propagating from stumps. If you just have a stump with a couple leaves on it, just set it in the corner and just kind of keep an eye on it, see what happens. Keep watering it like you would regularly water it with the soak and let it dry out system. Okay, a few tips I want to add is keeping your succulents clean. This one right here is new, and he is called a Black Prince. As long as you give this one a lot of great sun, it will stay black. Once it's missing light, it'll start to turn more green. Underneath, you'll always kind of want to check and see, oh, we have a little baby pup growing under there. That's a nice surprise. I didn't even know that. I don't know if you can see that right there. Here's a little baby. Eventually that'll start to grow out and you'll want to cut that off so you can give the mother plant a rest and let that one callus over and put it in its own pot. But if you, during the growing season, which quite often is the spring for a lot of the succulents, you'll want to check online to see when your succulent does its best growing. You'll want to use your tweezers and try not to disturb the healthy leaves and pull off any dead leaves. That'll help with air circulation. It'll keep bugs away and it'll let the energy focus on the healthy leaves and help it thrive. At the library, we have fabulous books that you can check out. Gardening Under Lights. This can help you start your own nursery, even if the room you have it in doesn't have any windows. This is by Leslie F. Halleck. And this is a newer book. I think we got it last year. It has a lot of great information in it. This one is about design. You can design glass gardens. It's by Melanie Florence. And it is a sweet, cute little book. It has some great pictures and ideas on what to do with your succulents, how to make little terrariums. Another design book, Infinite Succulent by Rachel Cohen. This is a sweet little book. It has even better pictures in it. Look at that display, that's really beautiful. And again, this is Infinite Succulent by Rachel Cohen. Stylish Succulents by Tokiro. This is a newer book as well. And then we have Planting Designs for Cactus and Succulents. This is by Sharon Asakawa. Sharon Asakawa. Don't know if I'm pronouncing that properly. And then for care, my absolute favorite one, which is very new, the Idiot's Guide series. It sounds like a horrible series title, but this is really a great series. It's similar to the Dummies series, and it really gets to the point and it has tips and tricks. But this guide is wonderful. Idiot's Guide Succulents by Cassidy Tuttle. And this one also has wonderful photos, care tips, step-by-step procedures for repotting and planting, even propagating. Couple more. Succulent Container Gardens. This has a lot of advice for using big pots and making arrangements in them and putting them outside. It tells you what combinations look and work the best together. This is by Deborah Lee Baldwin. Plant Finder's Guide, Cacti and Other Succulents by Keith Grantham. And the last book, this one. This is written by Janelle Leon. So all of these books are available at Lincoln City Libraries. As long as you have a Lincoln City Library card, they are free to check out for 3 weeks. So come and see us, and we'll show you where our succulents are at, our succulent books are at. And I think one more thing I wanted to talk about are bugs. Soil gnats are a huge problem. And instead of using chemicals on them, you can just go to any garden center and get sticky pads. You just pop these little sticky strips into your plants, and they're yellow, which attracts the soil gnats, and they stick to them, and you can just change them out, and eventually the soil gnats will be gone. Unfortunately, soil gnats populate very quickly, and they lay eggs in your soil, so you will want to change out that soil completely. I wouldn't even put it in my compost. I would throw it away if you have a gnats infestation. Okay, so those are my tips and tricks. I want to go over my 3 most important ones. Always use a pot that has a drainage hole. 2, use a potting medium soil that is for succulents, otherwise you will have a host of problems. And 3rd is the watering system of soak and dry. So you're going to let your plant completely soak, let the water drain out of the bottom, and then you're not going to plant it again until or water it again until it's completely dry. And one tip for figuring out if your plant is dry is very simple. This is my other favorite tip. All you have to do is just stick your finger down in there a couple inches. If it feels even slightly damp, wait a week. If it feels cold, then it's probably still just a tiny bit wet and I would wait. When you're in doubt, wait a week and check again. You can tell if you're overwatering because your leaves will turn translucent. When you bump them, they'll start to fall off. And you can tell when you're underwatering because leaves will start to curl up. You'll start to get little air roots. Here's some air roots right here. This one did not get enough water, which is my fault. These will not harm the plant. You can also take those off. But those are a few indications about overwatering. Those are my last few tips I had. Thank you so much for tuning in for Container Gardening with Succulents. And again, I'm Jessica with Lincoln City Libraries. Thank you.